Always we Hey Zave, sorry, I had to take host back because I needed to unmute, but cool. Good to see everybody. Hey Jan, what's up? Um yeah, go wow, what an excellent group of folks to have here tonight. Cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and we are recording this for posterity as always. Welcome to our third talk on capitalism and homelessness. We are doing these people's education series. This is the third in the series that we've done over the month of February. So the first two were more like locally specifically focused on the history of homelessness in Portland. Last week we talked about the history of Jason Barnes Landing, the community that we are working with out in St. John's. And today we are going to take a little bit of a zoom out, and then Zave is going to zoom us right back in on the connections between homelessness and capitalism. Spoiler alert for this whole talk, and if y'all take one thing away from it, the reason there is homelessness is because of capitalism. The system of private property itself is what fundamentally results in some folks having 31 dwelling units, and other people having fucking zero. So without further ado, I'm just going to go ahead and introduce myself, and then I'm going to pass it off to Zave so he can introduce himself, and then we are going to get right into it. So my name is Brian Kim. I am a yellow American revolutionary of Korean and Irish descent. I am one of the co-founders of the People's Housing Project and the director of the financial team. To me, housing is a fundamental human right, and it is fundamentally unjust that there are people on the streets at all, especially in, it's one thing to have poverty when there's not enough resources. It's entirely a different thing to have poverty when there are so many resources that some of them are sitting fucking empty. So with that being said, I'm going to pass it off to Zave.
Okay, thank you. You took also the power of muting back. That is a powerful feature. Yeah, thank you everyone for being here. I'm Zave. I'm also one of the co-founders of People's Housing Project. I use he, him pronouns, and in the same vein of Brian, I am a Jewish queer revolutionary. I have been recently very inspired by the work of Sylvia Rivera. And as she says, there is no pride for some of us without liberation for all of us. And as we can see, we live in a system because of capitalism that we have white supremacy as the dictating cultural force. That is like where we see all of the white men in power and domination, and everyone else is put second structurally anyway. And this is why we continue to see homeless trans women of color being some of the forefronts of this crisis. They're put last in white supremacist patriarchy. And part of the responsibility for me is to make sure that I am doing what I can as someone who is white presenting and a cis gay male to continue the legacy of the trans homeless women of color who came before us. And with that, I'll switch it back to Brian as we get into the nitty gritty of like, what the fuck capitalism? Why did you do this and how?
And how? Okay, cool. So the way that this is going to go is like I said, I am going to start with a big zoomed out perspective, and then Zave is going to take us back into what everything I'm about to say has to do with Portland, which is really how it expresses itself, right? Because at the end of the day, there is no general homelessness crisis without there being thousands and hundreds of thousands of individual homeless folks, people without housing. So when we're talking about homelessness and houselessness, this is not, and I think this should be obvious, these are not value statements. These are reflections of reality that the folks we're talking about do not have the basic access to human shelter. So the first thing we're going to do is a little game. So I'm going to read a quote, and then I want y'all to type in the chat what year you think this was written. So the growth of the big modern cities gives the land in certain areas, particularly those in which are centrally situated, an artificial and often colossally increasing in value. The buildings erected on these areas depress this value instead of increasing it because they no longer correspond to the changing circumstances of the world. They are pulled down and replaced by others. This takes place above all with workers' houses, which were situated centrally and whose rents, even with the greatest overcrowding, can never ever or only very slowly increase above a certain maximum. These are pulled down, and in their stead, shops, warehouses, and public buildings for shopping are erected. Through its landlords, the dominant ideology exploited this tendency tremendously for its own swindling and private enrichment. The result is that the workers are forced out of the centers of the town towards the outskirts. The result is that the workers' dwellings and small dwellings in general become rare and expensive and often altogether unobtainable. For under these circumstances, the construction industry, which has offered a much better field for speculation by more expensive houses and dwellings, builds worker dwellings only by the way of exception. The this housing shortage, therefore, certainly hits the worker harder than it hits any of the more prosperous classes. Who's got thoughts on what year that was written? Good guesses. 1858, 1902, 1820. See, even asking the question gives away the fact that, like, okay, you are all correct. This is more the, yeah, it could be any year. That's the point, Antonio. Is that correct? That could have been fucking any year under capitalism. So that is a quote from an essay or a series of articles called Frederick Engels. It's called "On the Housing Question" by a German philosopher named Friedrich Engels. Engels. So he wrote that in 18. So the correct answer is he wrote that in 1871, or at least that's the year that the three letters were published. And like what's predominant to me is that in 2022, like when I was reading this last year, this was 150 fucking years old. Y'all, this is 150 fucking years old. Like that's how long the capitalism has been causing this problem. And the reason that I bring this up is that like anytime, like one of the core things you should take away is that shelter's a human right. It's something that we need in order to survive. It's something that we need in order to maintain our mental health. It's something that we need in order for our physical and emotional safety. The fact that it is a commodity, which means that it is something that is bought and sold on the market, means that if you don't have the money to afford the commodity, just like if you can't afford a Lexus or you can't afford a pack of gum, you don't fucking get it. Anytime that rights become commodified, rights and commodities are fundamentally incompatible. And anytime that you have rights turned into things that should be rights turned into commodities, you have fundamental human rights violations. You see this in housing, you see this in healthcare, you see this in food equity and food justice, because the United States has the highest rate of child malnutrition in the developed world and a higher rate of child malnutrition than Cuba. So do not believe the hype when they tell you that we live in the best of all possible worlds and capitalism is the best of all possible systems, because it fucking is not. And as prices go up, wages have a tendency to stay the same. Goddamn right. So what is capitalism? Capitalism is fundamentally a system of private property. It's the idea that like some people can own land and buildings and stuff, and they can use violence and force to keep other people off of that stuff and land. And point number one about private property. Private property is always in the final analysis backed up by violence. You cannot have private property without needing to enforce it by violence at some point. One of the things that we're going to get into, is that there is no way for land which was previously not owned by anyone, to have become owned by some people without violence or the threat of violence. So, and it is important. And the reason like I want to start with this history, and the reason I like start with these quotes and these people, and the quotes I'm about to read from Jean-Jacques Rousseau from the 1780s, and more stuff from a guy named Vladimir Lenin in the 1910s and 20s, is that like these are not like new. It's to give us all confidence and a sense of calm, faith, and with the understanding that like these are not new problems. We are not alone in this now, because there are not like there are 10 of us here combined with all of the folks who couldn't fucking make it. Like we're not alone here in this present moment, but we're also not alone in the context of history. We have more than 150 years of people who were fighting against not just like oppression and injustice, but specifically fucking housing justice as it relates to capitalism. So we're not alone, and there's a lot of like really, and we don't have to. The other thing, the reason that gives me confidence is we don't have to fucking reinvent the wheel. We don't have to come up with every idea from scratch. Like we absolutely have folks who are much fucking smarter than me that we can read and draw from, who fought in a lot of struggles. And those are the folks I'm going to look to now. So the first person we're going to start with is a French revolutionary theorist named Jean-Jacques Rousseau. He is not a communist. He was a bourgeois revolutionary writing against the monarchy, because for his time in history, uh, they were living in an age of absolute sovereignty where the monarch had all the rights and the responsibilities, and you had fucking none of them. And what he was examining, and what this essay is called, is a discourse upon the origin and the foundations of inequality among mankind. So basically, where the fuck does inequality come from, and why do we have it? And for Rousseau, the long story short is that inequality comes from private property. So when human beings evolved, right? And it's like you go all the way fucking back to pre-humanity. It's just a series, there's just species all over the world. They eat, they fuck, they live, they reproduce, they fight to survive. Some of them do, some of them don't. Darwin, evolution, animals, apes, pre-human apes on the come up, like the Australopithecus and the Homo sapiens who were developing their vocal cords and their frontal lobes, who were first walking upright, the primitive state of human beings before the foundation of agriculture and the civilization, right? Rousseau looks back to that time because once there was no private property and now there is, so where the fuck did it come from? So what Rousseau says, in this primitive state, as there were neither houses nor cabins nor any kind of property, every one took up their lodging at random and seldom continued above one night in the same place, right? Because they're hunter gatherers. Males and females united without any premeditated design, as chance, occasion, or desire brought them together, nor had they any great occasion for language to make their thoughts known for each other. Right. So, talking about hunter gatherer society, we don't even really sleep in the same place like human beings used to. And this is true all over the world. They would follow the herds, they would follow the seasons, they would follow the fruits, and they would follow the land and live off it. People did not stay sedentary. But at some point, human beings develop agriculture. This happens independently in a bunch of places, right? And as you develop agriculture, you start to develop the need to control access to land, because they're not all pieces of land are equal for fucking growing food. Just like not all berry bushes and not all spots along the river are equally good for fishing. And the tribes used to fight for control of those things. And what used to be collectively controlled by one tribe starts to become controlled by individual people who are growing food. To quote from Rousseau, the first man who, after enclosing a piece of ground and I think this is one of the times where I'm not going to change it to a gender neutral term, because it absolutely is a man. The foundation of, like, Gerda Lerner talks about how the foundation of private property is impossible without xenophobia and xenocide and racism, which are also impossible without patriarchy. Anyway, the first man who, after enclosing a piece of ground, took it in his head to say, "This is mine," and found people simple enough to believe him, is the true founder of our civil society. How many crimes, how many wars, how many murders, how many misfortunes and horrors would that man have saved the human species who, pulling up the stakes or filling up the ditches, should have cried to the others, "Be sure not to listen to this impostor. You are lost if you forget that the fruits of the earth belong equally to us all and the earth itself to nobody." Yes, thank you, Zave. So, as long as men remain satisfied with their rustic cabins, as long as they confine themselves to the use of clothes made of the skins of animals and the use of thorns and fish bones and putting these skins together, as long as they continue to consider feathers and shells as sufficient ornaments and to paint their bodies different colors, to improve their bows and arrows, to form and scoop with stones their little fishing boats or clumsy instruments of music. In a word, as long as they undertook such works only as a single person should finish and stuck to such arts as did not require the joint endeavors of several hands, they lived freely, healthy, honestly, and happily, as much as their nature would admit, and continued to enjoy with each other all the pleasures of an independent intercourse. But from the moment that one man began to stand in need of another, and from the moment it appeared an advantage for one man to possess the quantity of provisions required for two, all equality vanished, property began. Labor became necessary, and the boundless forest became the smiling fields, which it was found necessary to water with human sweat, and in which slavery and misery were soon seen to sprout out and grow with the fruits of the earth. Whew, there's a lot there. Once it became advantageous for one person to control other people's labor. So this is the 1780s, 1770s, 1780s, Mads. Basically, once it became an advantage for one person to control and own what could be used for more, these became riches, and the control of them became the source of conflict and battle throughout the human race. Riches, before the inventions of science to represent them, could hardly consist in anything but land and cattle, the only real goods that men could possess. But when their estates increased so much in number and extent as in to take in whole countries and touch each other, it became impossible for one man to aggrandize himself but at the expense of some other. And the supernumerary inhabitants, like the extra motherfuckers who didn't own property, who were too weak or too indolent to make such acquisitions in their turn, impoverished without losing anything, because while everything about them changed, everything around them changed, they alone remained the same and were obliged to receive or force their subsistence from the hands of the rich. And thence began to flow, each according to the different characteristics, domination and slavery, violence and rape. The rich on their side soon began to taste the pleasure of commanding when they preferred it to every other, and made use of their old slaves to acquire new ones. They thought no longer of anything but subduing and enslaving their neighbors, like ravenous wolves who, having once tasted human flesh, despise every other food and devour nothing but men for the future. It is thus that the most powerful and the most poor, respectively considering their power and poverty, even equivalent to equality, was broken, was followed by the equality broken by property was followed by shocking disorder. Whew. So yeah, he is not subtle in his opinions about private property and the ill that it causes, especially by the time that you have nothing else. When all of the land has been divided, all that's left is for motherfuckers to fight against one each other. It creates a chaotic state. It is something that is inherently backed by violence. And just like he says, the rich increase the quantity of their estates, and the poor and the impoverished are pushed off to deal as they may. This was true in feudal times. They believed that capitalism and dividing the noble estates into private property would like save us from the thing. But over time and over the development of capitalism, what you see is all of these private properties increasingly agglomerating into monopoly capital, right? There used to be 2,000, there used to be thousands of banks, and now there's like 4. There used to be hundreds of video game companies, and now there's fucking 2. There used to be like dozens of phone companies. Like they broke the phone companies. Like for those of y'all who are old enough to remember, they broke the phone companies up in the 80s. Like I wasn't there, but it's on Wikipedia. They split 2 phone companies into like 15, and they've all re-merged back into the same 2 fucking phone companies. And because you can't reform the trend towards monopoly under capitalism. And as things tend towards monopoly, you end up with class conflict. And that's why there's inequality and war, according to Rousseau. So, what does capitalism do about the fact that it trends towards inequality and war? Um, yeah, Stacey. Yeah, see, you remember that? Like, and it's like they broke up. Like, in my other favorite one is they broke up Standard Oil, like the Rockefeller Oil Company in 1911, into like 26 different oil companies. And like Exxon used to be was like Standard Oil of New Jersey. Mobil was Standard Oil of Virginia. Yep, the Ma Bell Company, and then it got broken up into the little baby bells. That's right. Yeah, they broke Standard Oil up into 27 different oil companies, of which Exxon and Mobil used to be 2 of those 27. And the fact that it is Exxon Mobil again shows you how they have reconglomerated over the last fucking 100 years back into the 3 fucking oil companies that you see that you can go get your gas from. Southern Bell. Yep. See, Andrew, you know what I'm talking about. And all we got from it was more bullshit, right? More bullshit advertising. So once you have monopoly capital in housing and you have a bunch of dispossessed homeless people and desperate people fighting over fucking housing, because unlike their cell phone plan, like not having access to housing will lead people to fucking riot and fucking kill each other over it. So the point, so in order to tamp down on that, and this is spoiler alert, this is the reason why our city government, everything I'm about to talk about is why our city government's not fucking capable of solving this problem, is because the long story short is that our government is a class government by and for the ruling class of its era. And the ruling class of our era today are the monopoly capital holders, including these fucking billionaire holding companies that are buying up all of the apartments. They keep building these fucking $2,700 for a studio apartment on Hawthorne, fucking ugly, like boxes, and they call Soviet architecture ugly and unoriginal. Fucking ugh. Anyway, the government is a defensive class power, and this is the core. Everything I'm about to talk about is from like 100-page book by a guy named Lenin called The State and Revolution. And what he means by the state is like all of the apparatuses of government that like pretend to be the neutral arbiters of civil society, right? So the things like our cops, the things like our courts, the things like our Congress, our schools, all of these things that are supposed like that are government entities that are like supposed to be separate from the private interest of any one person or class or any one race and fucking work for everybody, because it's like above all that, this is a neutral forum. Like the state's a neutral playing ground where all the interests are considered and we come to the best conclusion for everybody, right? Like so for that's like what we're told the government is, and for Lenin that's all bullshit. For Lenin and people who believe him, including me, the point of the government is to suppress class conflict. To quote, the state is not a neutral apparatus. Rather, it is a product of society at a certain stage of its development. Its existence is an admission that the society has become entangled with an insolvable contradiction within itself, that it is split into irreconcilable antagonisms which it is powerless to dispel. But in order that these antagonisms, these classes with their conflicting economic interests, might not consume themselves and the whole society in a fruitless struggle, it became necessary to have a power seemingly standing above society that would alleviate the conflict and keep it within the bounds of order. And this power arisen out of society, but placing itself above it and alienating itself more and more from that society is what we call the state. The state, however, grows stronger in proportion as the class antagonisms within it become more acute. And as adjacent states become larger and more populous, so the government gets stronger as the class antagonisms escalate, right? And as the countries around it have the power to hit at it. So why do you need a standing army? It's because motherfuckers also have you need a big enough army to fight back. Like, why is the United States doing the Patriot Act? In order to hold the class antagonisms in check and in order to check antagonism from other countries. Like, why did we not have a CIA and then develop one? It's in order to extend the global reach of American capital. We needed a state apparatus to enforce our interests all over the world, including during the Cold War and within in our fight with the Soviet Union and China. Take care, Antonio. Good seeing you, brother. We only have to look at present day Europe, where class struggle and rivalry and conquest have turned up public power to such a pitch that it threatens to swallow the whole of society and even the state. See also the reason why our defense budget is $870 billion, and we spend more than the next 16 countries combined, 15 of which are our fucking allies. Because the state arose from the need to hold class antagonisms in check, because it arose at the same time in the middle of these conflicts, it is, as a rule, the state of the most powerful, economically dominant class, which, through the medium of the state, becomes the politically dominant class and thus acquires new means of holding down and exploiting the oppressed. The ancient and feudal states were organs for the exploitation of the slaves and serfs. Likewise, the modern democratic state is an instrument for the exploitation of wage laborers by capital. So that is why that is why the police budget is $6 million fucking dollars for sweeps, $500,000 for hostile architecture benches in fucking Laurelhurst Park, and less money for shelters for homeless people. It is why the houseless have no rights and why their property is destroyed, and why they, like people of color, are more likely to be victims of police brutality because they are assumed to because they lack the class and they lack the class and the resources to fucking fight back and to have the rights, because rights are never given, they're enforced by the state. And if you are not one of the people for whom the state exists, you do not have the same rights. Women, people of color, queer people, homeless people, all fucking know this to be true. And if you do not, then you need to study the history of you. If you are one of those people and do not believe that, you must study the history of your own struggle, my friend, because I promise that this state was not fucking founded for any of us. You used to have to own property to be able to vote, even for white men. And it is why solutions presented by the capitalist society and the capitalist state never fucking work, and why you can't just vote. Like, why don't we just vote in better Democrats? Like, why don't we just vote for better people? It's like, because the state doesn't exist to allow those people. The state structurally is not going to let those people make the change they want to see, even if they fucking get elected. The state will bring them to heel. They will be forced to cooperate. Look at how Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez has de-radicalized since her fucking campaign, which is a heartbreaker, but very instructive. And just to conclude with some practical facts, you cannot count, we have a Democrat supermajority in the Oregon Congress. We have 5 Democrats in the Portland City Council. We have 5 Democrats in the Multnomah County Commission. Oregon has we are tied for second place in terms of states with the highest rates of homeless people who are unsheltered. Nationwide, the average is 39%, but here in Oregon, it's fucking 61. So we are almost twice as bad as the national average for having unsheltered people with our fucking Democrat supermajority. And it's because these no support for capitalist politicians and no support for parties of capital, because these fucking parties are not really going to fix our problems. And yeah, we have the 4th highest rate of homelessness in the entire fucking country as a state. Democrats are not going to fix things. Electing the right Democrats are not going to fix things. We need a political party and political organizations that are grassroots funded by and for the working class. And that is part of why the People's Housing Project is funded exclusively by grassroots donations, because you are accountable to the class of people who keep you in power. And the reason we have the power to build these shelters and these warming huts and host, like, to fucking pay for this Zoom, is because our power comes from the working class. Like, it does not come from the wealthy who are going to hear me give this talk and be like, hey man, if you say that shit again, you're not getting a $50,000 grant to do the work you want to do. And that is why independent class power is important. I feel like I have ranted for 30 minutes straight, and it is 7:05, and that is my time. So I'm going to pass it off to Zave, and I really appreciate all of y'all. Y'all are beautiful people. So again, for those of you who have not, I cannot recommend that Lenin book, State and Revolution, enough as far as dispelling notions about illusions about the Democratic Party and capitalist politicians. He was very harsh and principled, and he won a revolution. And the Black Panther Party read him and agreed with him and led the largest successful left-wing colored movement in this country in recent memory. And I think we would do well to listen to the people that Huey Newton took seriously. All right, I'm gonna shut the fuck up. Zave, you're beautiful. Take it away.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. I got to say, your rants are like some of the most informed, educated, thoughtful, insightful, like well-researched rants that I have ever experienced. So thank you very much for getting the ball rolling there. Yeah, I guess since you started with a game, I want to start with a game. How about people put in the chat, so nationwide, how many empty housing units do you think there are per houseless person? 10. Yes, for every one houseless person, how many empty housing dwellings do you think? All right, so you got 10, 10, 8, 5, 54. I've wondered for years. Excellent. Well, wonder no more. I looked it up before this call because I had been telling people on the street, I had heard the number was 9. And I just like looked it up to double check, and aha, the number is 31. Like nationwide, there are 31 empty housing dwellings per one houseless person. It is literally a 1 to 31 ratio. And this is how you can see capitalism create manufactured scarcity. Because like the reality is that we have more than enough. We have more than enough empty housing for people to live in, and we still have houselessness. And when it's down to it, we can see like as Brian has pointed out, like this is a system by and for the rich to do whatever it takes to keep them even richer, even when it means we could give everybody a house and still have 30 houses for people to like buy and sell and whatever, you know. But this is what happens when like for-profit private property interests come before the needs of the people. And I was just shocked. That's numbers even higher than I thought it was, you know? And as Brian said, like the power really comes from the people and from the community taking, some let them eat cake shit. You know, the power comes from people, or the community members taking it back. That is why like we build camps out. That's why we support the camps that already exist. You know, it's like there's plenty of land and there are plenty of resources. They just don't get distributed. And in honor of Black History Month, which is this month, similar to how Brian is talking about the Black Panthers, who I love, unfortunately, little known fact is like Martin Luther King Jr. was an outspoken anti-capitalist. Like, dude, 60 years ago, 50, 60 years ago, was saying that capitalism is the root of these issues. And until we have a redistribution of wealth, like we're going to be stuck in these exact same systems. I had a quote here. We are saying that something is wrong with capitalism. There must be better distribution of wealth, and maybe America must move toward a democratic socialism. And so he was a democratic socialist. I think that we need to have more of a redistribution of wealth and turn into, like Brian pointed out, like the Panthers were communists, they were Marxists. And that is like where our critiques come from, is like people 150 years ago pointing out these systems, and they're more relevant than ever. And something, who here has heard people say like, oh, like the system is broken, you know, or who here has like said like the system is broken, it needs to be fixed. You know, everyone here has like probably said that or heard that, right? So that is kind of untrue. And that's like, capitalism is doing exactly the system that it is set up to do. You know, it's like, oh, well, why, when we keep voting people in, does it not work? Or why are all of these nonprofits not helping? Like, it's because the system isn't broke. There's nothing that you can do to reform a system that's inherently about making sure the wealthy get as much as they want at the expense of like the working class people. And I feel like that's one of the ways we get funneled into, you know, the nonprofit industrial complex, is we want to believe that the solution can be as simple as we need to make a few reforms and it'll be fine. And I think we've seen at this point, like everyone's here because you've all seen time and time again, like that's just not true. And that is one of the ways that capitalism keeps its power, is by continuing to try and divert you. Like, maybe if you voted harder, did you try voting harder? Did you try triple voting? Oh, if you did, we'll put you in jail. So you still only get the one vote, but vote harder somehow. You know, if we make enough nonprofits, eventually it'll work. But like, nonprofits are just as much a part of this for-profit ecosystem. You know, my friend said the other day that like whatever is inside ripples outwards. And when we are talking about organizations and nonprofits, it's like the same issues that are out in capitalism are in the structures of these businesses. You know, like how much is the CEO making, right? Like how much is the board making? You know, how much are the workers making? Like, there's so many videos, if you go on YouTube and put in like former social worker now houseless, there are dozens of videos with different people who are literally in these nonprofit systems and are now homeless. So you can see like all of these systems they reflect their insides and their outsides. And even in the nature of how our system works, is anyone familiar with the Commerce Clause? A little bit. So the Commerce Clause, this one is one that is super worth looking up. I took a intro to the US legal system class a few months ago, because I was like, wait, I don't really know how the legal system works. What's going on? And so, fun fact, the federal government cannot pass any legislation that isn't part of like national defense, or it's like national defense is one of them. There's there's like 4 things that the federal government can legislate over. And one of them is commerce. So all of the different civil rights acts that we've seen passed are because the government is not able to actually pass legislation just however it wants. So like if we think about like the Civil Rights Acts of 64 and 68, those didn't just get passed. They had to go in and make an argument for why racism is bad for business. The only way the federal legislation can pass most of the legislation we've seen is when they connect it to business. So even in how our democracy works, it is literally built around what is good for business. And that is it. ADA had to be shoved down the throats of politicians. I am extremely sure that, yeah, that's like something I really want to get into in a future talk, is talking about disability and accessibility and houselessness. Like, there is a dude, the site over there was flooded when it was wetter. And there's like this, you know, right across the dirt path, this huge amount of water. And there was a dude in a wheelchair who just couldn't get through. And we were able to dig the trench out with our fucking awesome Corps of volunteers, and he was able to get through, you know. And same, we also were the first people who had porta potties out there that are handicap accessible. The city just doesn't. If you notice, none of the porta potties the city puts up are ever handicap accessible. Yep, Jen, things will pass as long as it's good for business. Exactly. And we've got all of these same exact issues here in Portland. Like, I don't have the numbers off the top of my head for how many empty units there are per houseless person, but we can figure out that it's going to be similar, you know. And like, we keep getting these horribly ugly cube-shaped apartments that cost like $3,000, and like, that's not where our money needs to go. And because we, the people, the community, don't have any say in the day-to-day other than these elections, which just feed back into a capitalist system, like, we don't get the resources we need. And the voting takes like years, right? It's another way we get diverted. It's like, oh, just like wait for the next election. Like, people are homeless today. You know, there's land out there today. There are there's structures from Harbor Freight that cost $180 that we can just buy and put out there today. And that is like why we are so insistent on talking about capitalism, because of the city and nonprofits will spin us in circles with these false promises. And it gets confusing, like, well, why isn't anything happening? You know, there's so many empty units, there's so much land, we keep electing people I don't understand. And it's because they're not beholden to us. You know, at the end of the day, like, the Portland Business Association is going to get the final say. And does the Portland Business Association want transitional villages that are like run by houseless people so they're empowered to like create their own agreements with each other and get the support they need? Not really. They just want them gone. And that's why Sam Adams proposed concentration camps, because they would rather just get rid of the problem than admit that it is our economic basis that causes these issues. Yeah, that was literally, if anyone didn't see that, that is what the top aide to the mayor, Sam Adams, just proposed in response to the houseless crisis, is concentration camps. You know, and it's like funny because in the work that we've done, we've gone 10 people into emergency shelters. We have weekly trash and needle cleanup. We've got 3 more shelters on the way. And when Brian and I went over there the other day, like, the folks came up to us, we, you know, checked in on them, and they're like, yeah, you know, things are so much better here. Like, I want to start being more accountable. I want to like start making this space better. I want all of us to like, you know, have our mutual agreements, and they want to get a fence up so they can really make this unit their space. So our hypothesis was correct. Like, if you redistribute wealth and materials and resources to where it needs to go, which is material resources like the shelters, right? But it's also ideological, like having community members who come and check in on you, you know, giving the attention, time, and materials to the places we need it, can address the issues instead of throwing people in concentration camps or a million more budgets that never go anywhere. Yeah, and Stacy said Sam Adams had promised that they were going to work with the School of Social Work, and they like never even talked to the School of Social Work at PSU. You know, and that's another lesson we can take away, is like, the issue is not more voting or concentration camps or voting. The issue is like, we've got all of the resources that we need. We just have to have the redistribution to where it needs to go. And we can see, like, you know, some pretty scary parallels where the city will just be like, oh, homeless people are the problem. The crime rate is homelessness. Everything is homelessness. But we never talk about like what made people this homeless, what made people this desperate, who funded the opioid crisis, who let all of that happen. Like, the city doesn't get held to any accountability. It's like, oh, these homeless people are the ones breaking windows, right? Or like, oh, these protesters were the ones breaking windows. It's never, the system made things so bad for the people, they had no choice but to push back, right? Or to take matters into their own hands. And I hope that that is something people take away, is to start to watch for when the messaging around solutions goes back into the system, and why it never there's no article in the front of OPB that's like, this just in, it's actually capitalism, right? Like, why all the main newspapers, all the bigger businesses, it's never going to talk about the central issue at hand. And I'm seeing if there are any fewer things that I have here that I wanted to talk about. Oh, I have one picture that Ryan and I came across when we were talking about the Great Depression. And so this is a picture of a Hooverville. And this is what, for anyone who doesn't know, Hoovervilles were small communities, villages that were run by people who were houseless during the Great Depression. And because there was so much houselessness and the city was in such a weak place, people set up like whole, as you can see, they like literally built, like shanties. And what really struck me is that the shanty towns of the 1940s Great Depression, of the Great Depression, are literally or look better than what we have now. So like we keep getting told to vote, we keep getting told that this is just a minor thing, it'll go away, but there is a long history. And we should be really concerned that we keep getting these promises when like what we have now is literally worse than what we had in the Great Depression. Yeah, Brian, you have, it's cute, you have your hand up. Oh. Oh no. Ooh, okay. More chats of blue pin, make host rename. Oh man, so many buttons. Can someone help me? How do I get you to unmute? There it is. Did that do it?
There we go. Yes, you did it. You're a hero. Lower hand. Boom. Yeah, and I think that say the last thing that you just said before we had the whole mute thing.
We should be aware of how we get the Hooverville shanty towns that were like,
yes, the Hoovervilles. Yeah, it is shocking because it's like when you actually look at them, they are made out of wood. They're like nicely constructed tiny houses. They look like the ones over at Dignity Village. And what's the other Hazelnut Grove. Yeah, they look like Dignity Village in Hazelnut Grove. Like these are so much nicer than tents. Like they're wood structures with chimneys in them, and you can tell that like these people were allowed to set up there and live there. So what we have today is a more evolved and more brutal system than they had in the 1930s. And Ted Wheeler is guiltier of greater war crimes than fucking Herbert Hoover. So the real question, like there's a couple questions here, which are like, what is to be done, right? And I think that number one, like this is part of why we continue to put these emergency shelters on public land, because at the end of the day, like one, people deserve shelter where they're at. Two, we cannot wait for the city to give us permits because this bourgeois class government is not going to give us permits in time to save people's lives. So that's part of why Mimi says we do people not permits, because we are not going to wait for the government of the United States to give us permission to do the right thing. This is without even getting into like the colonial government of the United States and the genocide of the natives and stolen land. Literally without even getting into all of that, like private property itself is fucked. And three, like one of the things that we think is really important and one of the things that we are escalating towards and would like to continue to push for is like, there are what you could call the waste grounds all over the place. There are all kinds of vacant lots, and all that they're defended by is a chain link fence and the concept that violence would be used on people who went there. So in the final analysis, one of the things that has worked historically is simple occupations of land. And that's kind of what we are working on, because like Hazelnut Grove did not start as a sanctioned camp. Like they didn't go apply for permits with a 501c3 and fucking get set up. They were in a spot that the city didn't want them, and they refused to move, and they had nonprofit partners and people working in the community to help keep them there. And eventually they won the permission to stay there. And that is what we are working to do here, because like if what property really comes down to is the use of force, whether that's violent or not, to say, hey, you can't be here on this land, then in the final analysis, what if we could marshal a sufficient amount of power to say, no, actually houseless people will be here on this land, then all the property laws in the fucking world go away. And it comes down to the courage of people to like be willing to, and it takes all types. Not everybody has to be out there getting arrested in the event of a sweep, but it takes all types. Like it takes volunteers, it takes social workers like healing these people, it takes builders getting these structures up, like it takes theorists and educators and fundraisers like to make sure that we have the money to build these structures and to talk to the members of the community. And it takes people doing culture like Jen, who's putting together a fundraising show at the beginning of April. Shout out to Jen, who is amazing. And on the note of culture, like I'm going to end on before we get into questions, I'm going to end on a 2.5-minute song called The World Turned Upside Down. It is a story, this is a true story of a movement in 1649 called the Levelers Movement. They were called the Diggers. And basically in feudal England, as feudalism was moving through what you call the Enclosure movement, right? Where they took what used to be the common lands and like where any of the peasants could fucking hunt, and they were like the public lands, and they were all enclosed, literally oftentimes by fucking stone walls, and the peasants couldn't cross the walls and they couldn't grow in the waste grounds anymore. So anybody who used to like grow crops to supplement their family or to sell stuff at market in the public waste grounds was no longer allowed to do that. So after about 30 or 40 years of the Enclosure movement's escalation, a group of people had a fucking enough, and they went to St. George. It's called the Levelers, and I will they were a Christian movement. They were Christian radicals who believed that private property was ungodly. They said, there's like this great quote from their leader, Gerard Winstanley, where he says, whose law is it that a man must come bearing silver or gold in his hand in order to be given a garment or food? Like, this is not God's law, so this must be man's law. And where man's law conflicts with God's law, it's evil, which is fucking a hot take. So anyway, without further ado, I'm gonna play this fucking song and then open this up to questions. Can you rehost me, Zave? Because I need to screen share and it won't let me. Here, oh bud. Sound sharing on.
In 1649, to St. George's Hill, a ragged band they called the Diggers came to show the people's will. They defied the landlords, they defied the laws. They were the dispossessed, reclaiming what was theirs. We come in peace, they said, to dig and sow. We come to work the lands in common and to make the waste grounds grow. This earth divided, we will make whole. So it will be a common treasury for all. The sin of property we do disdain. No man has any right to buy and sell the earth for private gain. By theft and murder they took the land. Now everywhere the walls spring up at their command. They make the laws to chain us well. The clergy dazzle us with heaven, or they damn us into hell. We will not worship the God they serve, the God of greed who feeds the rich while poor men starve. We work, we eat together, we need no swords. We will not bow to the masters or pay rent to the lords. We are free men, though we are poor. You diggers all stand up for glory, stand up now. Men of property, the orders came. They sent the hired men and troopers to wipe out the diggers' claim, tear down their cottages, destroy their corn. They were dispersed, but still the vision lingers on. You poor take courage, you rich take care. It's This earth was made a common treasury for everyone to share, all things in common, all people one. We come in peace, the orders came to cut them down.
So that is Billy Bragg, by the way, who's one of the great folk singer heroes of all time. Cool. So that concludes the ordered part of this presentation. So thank you all for being here. Does anybody have any questions or want to raise their hand or any thoughts they want to share, any feelings? We have talked a lot. Is that you, Jen? Cool. Ask to unmute.
Thanks for that. I just looked up the chords on Ultimate Guitar. I'm going to learn it. And I sent them to Dan too.
Good. That definitely wasn't a sub goal of mine or anything when I saw you on this call.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for showing up. And you guys, really a wonderful presentation. I just wanted to say real quick that there is, I mean, I don't know if this is too early to mention it, but I think it's perfect. We're planning a protest march on March 5th and gathering musicians and then apparently there's other mutual aid groups that Zave and Brian are in contact with. So it's starting to percolate, but there is a date, March 5th, and there is interest from musician friends of mine. And so I just wanted to start spreading the word for you guys to then help start spreading the word.
Cool. Thank you, Jen. That was
Thank
beautiful.
You. Thank you.
And of course, yeah, if you learned, Billy Bragg is a fountain of amazing fucking left-wing songs. If you've never heard of him, he's great. Richard, what you got? You got to click a button. I have to ask you to unmute, and I think you have to unmute yourself.
There it is.
There you go.
Thanks. My favorite Billy Bragg song. If you haven't heard it yet, look it up. It's wonderful. Hooray for the riffraff. Yeah.
Bro, I hardly ever meet people who have even heard of Billy Bragg, let alone no fucking deep cuts I've never heard. All right, what you got, boy? What's it called? Hooray for the riffraff. All right.
Hooray for the riffraff. And I just want to let you know that I am fortunate to be involved with a group of people from across this nation who are actually building the structures to develop a people's party, a real people's party. We work through sociocracy. We hold each other accountable. There is no one person in charge. We're all in charge. We all build this thing together. And it is unique in my experience in that we are embryonic. And as we begin to build our standards and our structure, again, we hold each other accountable. We have representation in that decision-making body from not only the various states, but anyone who is interested enough to gather with others to present a strong voice in that group. So there could be in that organization people deciding how this organization move forward, a housing equity circle that has a voice in this decision-making body. So I will put my email in the chat. If any of you are interested in becoming involved, do let me know and I'll connect you up with the server where all the information and all the meetings and stuff are scheduled. I know you're all busy. You're doing the work of the people, and it's a joy to have found you. I've only been around for a couple of weeks now, and I'm just totally stunned and amazed of the intelligence and experience and knowledge and the application of that knowledge for the betterment of people in need. So bless you all.
That was really beautiful, man. Thank you. Yeah, I would love to hear more about the party, because I do think we need, having political formations and organization is key. One of the things that was the most disappointing to me about the uprisings of 2020 was how little of that mobilization got organized for the long term and still seems to be as high functioning as it was back then today. And I would really like to continue one of the goals of PHP, and like one of the reasons why we do monthly fundraising, and one of the reasons why it's like we are building these volunteer meetings and doing these educational outreaches, is because it's like there's not like PHP doesn't really have any power. Like at the end of the day, like the people have the power. Like the Bolsheviks didn't overthrow the Tsar, like the people of Russia overthrew the Tsar. Like Mao didn't overthrow the Chinese government, like the people of China overthrew the fucking Chinese Republic. Castro didn't overthrow the Batista regime, like through an organization, the people of Cuba overthrew the Batista regime. Like Ho Chi Minh didn't defeat South Vietnam. Through an organization, the people, like through the organization he built and its political expression, the people of Vietnam liberated themselves. Like in the end of the day, it's only the final analysis, only the people have any power. Richard, I'm going to email you right now just so you have my email. Cool. Does anybody else have any thoughts or feelings or ideas or questions? Andra, am I saying Andra? Andra? You can tell me once you're unmuted.
Yeah, Andra is perfect. Hi. I don't really have much to add. I just want to say thank you to y'all for being engaged with mutual aid. I've been involved with it for a pretty decent while, but going through some stuff with the city right now. I have a community fridge at my house, and I'm currently fighting a city violation code, a zoning code violation, which feels fucking ridiculous right now.
Yep.
And, you know, for the first couple months, I was really trying to like stay in the mindset of like, we're going to work with the city and we're going to find a way to stay in compliance. And I've now come to the full conclusion that that's not a possibility. And we just need to like keep moving forward. And, you know, until they come and try to burn it down, then it's going to stay up and it's going to keep feeding people. And that's how it's going to be. But have gotten a lot of like, even like-minded neighbors. It's just nice to hear this this level of dedication, this level of education, this level of awareness. Everybody in this group is giving me hope, because I keep hearing, like, even from like good friends of mine, like, you know, there's got to be someone you can email and someone in so-and-so's office. And I'm like, I just can't tell you, it's not happening. It's you and me. You want to come over and help me build a new fucking structure and put it on wheels so it can roll in and out? Bring it. But anyway, I just wanted to thank you for making my heart feel a little warmer, you know. And I mean, y'all know, like, Portland mutual aid winter, it was a tough one. So
yeah, no, and I appreciate all of that. First of all, like the community fridge thing sounds fucking amazing, and I'm really like, that's
it's
really
the
cool.
shit.
Yeah, I'm really glad you're doing that, and I'm really like, it's very good to hear people being willing to stand on their rights to fucking feed people.
Yeah, man.
It's such a base, like zoning codes. Like, so you want to talk about like, a government being a class government, like zoning codes. Like, why are there fucking zoning codes on what's supposed to be your space?
Right.
Like, oh, so private property runs out real fast when it comes to you helping homeless people.
Yeah. So I'll take
those little fucking libraries aren't getting zoning code violations.
Oh, I know. Well, the stupid thing is that it was a neighbor that called the violation in. Because at first I was like, how the fuck do they have money to send around an inspector right now? But the stupid thing is it was a beautiful little structure. And now it's got a roof off of it. It's got a tarp over it, because I'm trying to stay within, like, if it doesn't have a wooden roof, it is in compliance as far as I know. I have no idea. But it's just so, I don't know. Anyway, it's the level of bureaucracy over just trying to put food in people's bellies is fucking mind-blowing.
You should tell them it's not wood, it's 3D printed, it's 3D printed plastic that's artificial wood, and that they should take a sample and test it, otherwise they should fuck off.
Right.
They should do they should pay for a molecular test, or they should fuck off.
Yes.
I don't know. Let us know if we can help you defend that, because that is the kind of thing
that effort. I appreciate that.
That's the kind of thing that, like, you know, so out in there's a coastal community in Oregon right now where there's a church. If you Google St. Timothy's Church, They're in the middle of a lawsuit with the
Oh,
fucking city
yes.
over feeding people because the city's like, you're a zoning violation by doing feeding at the park, and you can't do it. You can only do it during these times. And they're like, yeah, no, Jesus said to minister to the poor, and it's our First Amendment right to fucking feed people. So we're gonna do it. And we're gonna sue you for interfering with our religious freedom. And it's like,
Yeah.
I think that just like any religion, there is a left-wing Christianity and a right-wing Christianity, and it is nice to see like people using their faith for good to feed people.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
am not like a spiritual Christian, but I have a lot of respect for fucking John Brown and the other Christians who like walk the walk. You know what I'm saying?
Right. There are four
So,
of them.
yeah, right. There need to be more of them. There's like 15 of them. Anyway,
But they're there.
yeah, so no, I really appreciate what you're up to. And
Yeah, man. Y'all too. Y'all
yeah,
too.
that's dope. Let us know if push comes to shove, we can help defend that or expand that program. Because yeah, no,
Yeah.
we do people, not permits. So
Yeah,
very-
precisely. Well, I mean, I might reach out to y'all because we're gonna start. My little group has started to move into sort of more direct distribution, especially this winter, because you're not leaving your camp when the
Yep.
weather sucks ass. So I have a lot of people who can make a lot of food. So if that's something,
that would be awesome. Yeah, because one of the things we're working on doing is getting, because we're already doing weekly cleanings, and we're already doing, and we're planning on starting Zave, not if I'm right, bi-weekly food distribution starting in March. Okay, I'm gonna unhear you fucking every week. Okay, so yeah, we're already working on getting that going. So the more that we can escalate that and spread it up and down the cut, maybe even 2 more days, the better off we're going to be. We're kind of turning Sunday into Sunday has just kind of dialectically evolved into being our focus day. So I don't really know
same. That gets
Yeah.
a natural. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Day.
The Catholic Church would be proud. Anyway, doing the Lord's work on Sunday.
Yeah.
Anyway, cool. Thank you, Andra.
Yes.
Andra, I love that. Cool. Thank you. What you got, Richard? I see your hand is up.
You mentioned
Also,
the library. You mentioned the libraries.
Yes, I think they're great. By the way, I do think they're great.
The little mini libraries. I was on a walk through our local park here, which was right up against some people's backyards, and there was a library, one of those little mini libraries. Then at thigh level was a community pantry.
See, that's a good thing. That's dope. We need more of that. Like, that's awesome. That's really, really cool. I love that.
It was canned food and macaroni and rice, and people can leave and take whatever they want.
Yeah.
It was awesome. So maybe we can get a group of people promoting that, go to everyone who has one of those libraries and hand them a box with a door on it and say, you want to attach this? We'll even load it with food to get you started.
We'll even do the first one we'll even load you up with the first one. Yeah, that'd be great. Just like boxes of granola bars, cans and shit. That'd be great. Richard, that is a great idea. What you got, Jen? I see you waving again.
I also wanted to mention, because I'm assuming most, if not all, everybody on the call knew about this call for Meetup. Pretty much. Okay. Well, yeah, Meetup is the best place to send people so that they can stay in the loop of whatever events we're putting on.
Yes, if you are not subscribed. Yes, Jen, good fucking call. So if you are not subscribed,
but that's not what I wanted to say, because eventually on the Meetup, we will be putting the date of our fundraiser, our first fundraiser show, because the last one got canceled.
COVID.
And so, yeah, so we're shooting for beginning of April, beginning mid-April for a fundraiser show. So just keep your eye out on that one. And once we find out more, we'll obviously put it on Meetup, or I don't know if there's an email list you guys are sending information. I'm not really sure how you guys have it set it up, but I just wanted to mention that real quick. There is a fundraiser show coming up in April with music.
Yes. And it's going to be awesome.
Yeah.
That's it. Not least. Oh yeah, we are also, yeah, that's a good point. So are there any other like questions about houselessness and capitalism, or like the presentation? Because there are definitely some cool, because if they're not, yeah, so we got a bunch of cool shit coming up. So this Sunday, I don't know if anybody is interested in No worries. No worries, Stacy. I totally get that. It is definitely hard to imagine a place without capitalism. And I definitely think there are spaces for like, and this is like, it is not going to be an overnight transition. You know what I mean? Like the idea of like abolishing capitalism, it's not a thing that's going to just like happen overnight. It's like the idea of like abolishing government. It's like eventually one day we all want there to be no police. Eventually one day we want there to be no prisons. We want there to be no government. Ideally, you know, we would like there to be enough for all. The real question is like, okay, well, like fucking what do we do tomorrow to get there? And it's like, okay, well, if capitalism is the problem, what is a mode of, because like we need all of the goods and services, right? Like we need housing, we need food, we need healthcare, we need insulin, we need social workers, like we need like doctors, we need microchips, we need solar panels, like we need like energy, we need all like plumbing and all this shit, right? Like we need all of the things. So how do we produce them without the capitalist mode of production? So a lot of very smart people who can get into the numbers, whose books I've read, some of whose books I've read, and others of whose books I've read most of, and some of whose books I haven't read at all, have all talked about basically what we're moving towards is a socialist mode of production, right? Where land and capital, like the factories that make the glasses and the microchips and the mines that get the turquoise and the fucking aluminum and the farms that grow the fucking food and the fucking weed and, you know, make the plastic that the fucking weed comes in, right? Like all of the idea is twofold with the socialist mode of production, one of which is the collective ownership of the means. So rather than like the factories being owned by like Elon Musk or fucking Jeff Bezos and the shareholders of Amazon, all of the workers as a collective through their own democratic decision making and organization own the company and control what happens to the hiring and firing and profits. It is a democratic cooperative. And then, so it's collective ownership. And two is democratic decision making and election of management. So right now, the way it works is a board of directors, the people who have the biggest clumps of fucking stock, who are the concerned investors, like, yep, the capitalists, right? The motherfuckers with the money, the homies. Like, these are the people, like, the board of a fucking company is basically like a mini democracy ruling a small nation. And when we're talking about Apple, which has a fucking valuation of $1 trillion and annual revenue of like $5.5 billion, like they have more money and more power and more employees like in population than a lot of fucking countries, you know, in some countries, you know what I mean? So like the board of directors is the mini oligarchy that runs that little economic country, right? So they're the ones right now, they elect the CEO, they elect the CFO, and then they empower him or her, mostly him and mostly white him, you know what I mean, to do the fucking to run the company and make all the choices, and the CEO answers to the fucking board, right? And sometimes there's struggles between the CEO, like boardroom drama, right? And all that fucking bullshit. So like what boardroom drama really means is politics, because we're having a political fight over the direction of the mini country. And all of that is to say we need to jail the people who are on the boards of the Fortune 500. We need to seize their assets because all of them are ill-gotten capital from the working class. We need to bring all of that capital under the collective ownership of the workers and elect rather than have the board appoint the CEO and he hires everyone down. And like a slaver, like the plantation, it's a fucking plantation system, right? Where there's master, and then he fucking picks the overseers, and the overseers fucking pick the buyers, and the buyers pick the fucking slaves, right? And at every step of the way, each layer is fucking abusing everybody all the way down. Like, and we need to replace that with a democratic bottom up fucking decision making system. where the workers, like in an ideal worker world, the workers of like that fucking Fred Meyer would be electing their shift managers, and then those shift managers would be electing the day manager, and then the day manager would be electing those guys would be electing the general manager, and then the general managers, who are all elected from all over Oregon or whatever the new territory is, like that's how we get going to. Yeah, no, I know. I know, Zave. I'm wrapping up. It is we should be like, the entire country could be like the entire economy needs to be elected by the workers in the industries. Unemployed people should have a union, patients should have a union. Like, we need to build democracy within our workspaces. And the cool thing about that as a socialist project is that that can fucking happen anywhere. Like, within the PSU grad program, like there is probably a student union whose job it is to like ameliorate your concerns and take them to the administration. And it's like, what y'all need is like revolution. Yeah, exactly. What y'all need is fucking revolutionary student unions that are like willing to blockade administrator offices and seize buildings like they were in the 70s, because that's how students got their demands met. They seized capital and only gave it back when the people who like own the capital fucking agree to do what they want. And like, the difference between like, and this is like a thing I said in the MLK talk, right? The difference between peaceful and nonviolent is a peaceful protest is you occupy a building and they ask you to leave or they're going to tear gas you and you say, yeah, okay, I guess, and you all fucking file out with your tails between your legs. A nonviolent protest, the use of nonviolent force is saying, look, we're not going to shoot guns at you if you try to take this building back, but you're going to have to use force to get us out of here. And I think there is power in that. Like, even just lying down on a bridge and going limp and making them carry 1,000 human limp bodies off a bridge, just the time and energy the pigs have to put into doing that makes a statement. It's like if they shoot tear gas into a crowd of fucking people lying down on the ground, that says a lot about their moral character, and that makes a statement. The point of nonviolence is to create tension to force dialogue, as Dr. King said. Richard, what you got? And then your Zave is right. We should wrap up and make our announcements about the things we have going on. Oh wait, wrong. Where is Richard? Oh, you're muted still. You're muted still, brother.
I put in chat a link to the U.S. Federation of Worker-Owned Cooperatives. That's an organization out of Oakland that is trying to promote the conversion of corporations to worker-owned cooperatives. So that's something to keep an eye on and learn from. One thing when it comes to corporations in general, it's important for all of us to recognize what most of us do not know, I'm afraid. And that is that corporations were created for the public good. The first corporation in America was created for the public good to build the Erie Canal and was shortly disbanded afterwards. And until about 50 years ago, every corporate charter that was written nationwide included the clause exist for the public good. And any citizen had the right to challenge the existence of the corporation based on that clause. It wasn't until the last generation or so that the Supreme Court ruled that profit is the supreme duty of a corporation. So if somehow or another we the people, if we're going to have corporations at all, can get back into the corporate charters, exist for the public good, we will have the control.
I hear that, and I like I like the work. I especially like the work that these co-ops are doing. There's a great podcast with a very dry New York gentleman who is not the most interesting to listen to, but he is extremely intelligent. His name is Dr. Richard Wolff with 2 F's. He runs a podcast called Democracy at Work. He is a big fan of pushing co-ops, and he's also a big fan of using like worker and union struggle to achieve that, which I think, and like I agree with you that if we can make change within the structures of things like corporations, we should. I am firmly convinced that the only way that is going to happen is through struggle, both by the workers there and the consumers on whom the corporation depends. And the more that we can build alliances between workers and the communities, the better off we're all going to be. Okay, so we do have things to, we have a couple logistical things to do, because at the end of the day, like all of this education about capitalism and homelessness needs to be applied to the practical struggle here. So there are two things this organization always needs, money and labor. If you are in the position and you are not already donating, like I said earlier, this is an entirely grassroots funded organization. We think that's important to build independent working and middle class power to solve the homelessness crisis. The best way to give is to sign up to pledge something small ongoing on a monthly basis, like $1 or $2 a day, because when 100 people sign up for $30 a month, that's $3,000 a month. And it means time that Zave and I don't have to spend and don't fundraising on the street. It's time that Jen doesn't have to spend making these shows for money. That way, like the more, thank you for posting. I was just about to post the Patreon link. So the best way to help out is to sign up to pledge something monthly on the Patreon, which Zave just posted in the thing. We also take one-time donations through GoFundMe and Venmo as well. In the end, you know, like we really just need people to give as much as they can, because we really believe in that, like, acts of Luke shit of like from each according to their ability to each according to their need, which is like Karl Marx like got that from the Bible for the Communist Manifesto. So if you are not in the position to give money or want to do more than just giving money, the other best way to help out is to come and give your time. So this Sunday, every Sunday, we have cleaning spearheaded by our core volunteers, some of whom become core members. Everybody shout out Mads. They are a fucking badass who leads 2 of the cleanings every month and is going to be moving on to the core team, because at the end of the day, like, it is not about, like, the power is not in the people. Like, that's the power of an organization, is to collect and organize energy, like, because there's a lot of people who want to be mobilized, but it's how do we organize that and make it efficient in a way that's going to help people and topple this fucking pig structure. So Sunday we have the weekly cleanings from 12 to 2:30. No experience required. It is coming out and helping houseless folks clean up their camp. Mads is leading this weekend's. So far we have 2 folks leading them, Mads and AJ. If somebody wants to take one of the Sundays, that would be super cool, and hit us up about that. And then this Tuesday is our big thing. We are deploying 3 of the structures. So we are going to be getting 3 new people, or possibly 4 people, depending on what's up with Eddie and Natasha. I am not the person in charge of who gets the structures, but long story short, we will be housing 3 or 4 people, or we'll be sheltering 3 or 4 people on Tuesday after the cleanup on Sunday. And I think part of this Sunday's cleanup is going to be doing landscaping and laying out gravel and wood chips in order to prepare the squares of ground where we're going to put the structures up, so that way they are more level, because we're trying to learn every time from what we do, because we are learning on the fly every time we build these structures. And we are learning from the folks we put in them, because that's what solidarity is about. It's not about, well, we got a government grant and this is what we have to do, otherwise they won't give us the money. It's about, we have the power to be flexible and to really work with people. And it's because folks give their time and their money. So if you have the power to give either, please do, because that's the only reason we've been able to do anything. And there is no power in a name like People's Housing Project. There's only power in the people who fucking show up. And I love you all. Thank you for being here. Does anybody have any final questions or want to pledge like $1,000 right now and really end this on an amazing note? I'm just kidding. The proletariat, the best way to contact to help, Zave, isn't it phppdx@gmail.com? Yep, that's it, right? That's it. No, it's People's Housing Project @gmail. Okay, I lied. It's not phppdx@gmail. It's People's Housing Project @gmail. And then we're also on Instagram, and literally everything else is fucking phppdx on Instagram, And that's annoying. Anyway, all right. Going once, going twice. Death to Capitalism and the Pigs, All Power to the People. Read Huey Newton if you haven't watched Stokely Carmichael and Kwame Ture on YouTube. No Gods, No Masters. Make a friend, share a laugh. Listen to Billy Bragg. All right. You're all excellent. I love you all. Take care. Stay safe and stay curious. Thank you, Jen.